Good afternoon and welcome to the second public lecture of our visiting professor, Dr. Hanna Teras of the Tampere University of Applied Sciences in Finland. Welcome once again, Dr. Hanna, and thank you for gracing us with your time.
Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here with
University
you today.
Institute of Technology, College of Education, through the Department of Technology Teacher Education in collaboration with Better Universities and Knowledge for All, or the BUCA project co-funded by the Erasmus Plus. We would like to welcome all of you, training participants, along with the faculty and teaching staff of the College of Education, especially to the DTTE faculty. We are very fortunate to have with us a very esteemed speaker of whom we know already since our first public lecture. Before we formally start, I would like to present a few reminders for our training this afternoon. First, the link for today's attendance will be provided in the Google Meet chat and in the comment section for our YouTube Live. For those of us present in the Google Meet, make sure that you are in a place with no distractions and have your microphones muted. To minimize data traffic and consumption, we request that you turn off your videos unless requested. Fourth, during the lecture, we request that the Google Meet participants refrain from chatting questions and comments and instead reserve them for the forum that will follow right after the lecture. Finally, to get your certificate of attendance for today's session, please accomplish the evaluation link, which will be given shortly before the end of the session. At this point, I know that everyone is excited to learn and connect the dots since our first session. Therefore, let's get started. To formally start, may I request everyone to please stand for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem and for a short prayer.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiliw, Teras ang silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dikit mo'y bumay. Lupang pinirang, kuya ka ng magiting, sa manluluping, di ka masisigiw, sa nagagang tutok sa simoy at sa langit ng bagaw, ay hinatang tulakawin sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang ng katawan mo'y tagumpay na nagtitindig, makituwin at araw niya kailan pang ay magtitindig. Lumalang araw ng walhagit pagsikap, mo'y langit sa piling ko. Ang hinigaya ng pagkay pag-aakit, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo. Once again, good afternoon and welcome to the second public lecture of our visiting professor, Dr. Hanna Teras. Participants, how are you? I hope that you are doing fine in your respective places, knowing that we have a lot to do in our university. But we are very happy to have you with us, joining for this very important webinar. Well, as a form of a review, our first session with Dr. Hanna was conducted last January 12,
and Dr. Hanna talked about how do we engage our students in an online learning environment. We were uh, we were taught about the different views we may have about online teaching, and at the same time the different models of learning designs. Today, we'll be continuing on the discussion on authentic learning, and Dr. Hanna will be imparting to us very important principles and knowledge about designing authentic learning tasks. As a way of introduction, our speaker and visiting professor Dr. Hanna Teras is the principal lecturer on digital learning environments at the School of Professional Teacher Education at Tampere University of Applied Sciences. Her research interests include authentic online learning for professional learning, emerging interactive technologies in education, teacher education, and teachers' professional development. She is involved in various projects involving a good number of universities both in Finland and abroad. Ladies and gentlemen, our visiting professor in her second public lecture, help me welcome Dr. Hanna Teras.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And once again, thank you for inviting me to share with you and learn from each other and have a good dialogue and conversation about teaching and learning, which I believe we share this passion for improving teaching and learning and helping our students achieve the best they possibly can. Uh, it's good to see you again. It's lovely to be here. As for us in Finland, we have even more snow now than we had before. we are absolutely swamped with snow. but here inside the house is nice and warm. Today, my topic is authentic learning, and especially how to design authentic learning tasks, and especially how to design authentic learning tasks in the challenging environment of online and distance education. When we think about authentic learning, we often think about very hands-on things. But in this presentation, I make an attempt to widen our perspective about authentic learning to encompass also online learning environments. So let's see if I can make the presentation happen again. Let's get it open. I hope it is this one, yes. All right. So authentic tasks in online learning is the title for this presentation. Now, last time, many of you, if not all, attended the previous lecture where I talked about different ways to engage learners in open and distance education settings. And I already mentioned briefly the idea of authentic learning. Authentic learning, of course, is a very big word. It's what is authentic learning? It can be many things. In this presentation, I talk about authentic learning in with the definition of authentic learning as a learning design framework, and there are certain principles that I will go through, and also I will share with you experiences that I've had with authentic learning in my own teaching, and also research results that I have got from my research in authentic learning. But before we get into that, I would like to pick from where we left last time. Those of you who were present last time, you will remember this picture of how Biggs uh, distinguished between three levels of thinking about teaching. And you might remember that level one, according to Biggs, was when we think that good learning depends on what the students are like. Level two is that we think that good learning depends on what the teachers are like. And level three is a more pragmatic level. It's actually the most helpful level because it will we have tools to actually address this level. So I don't think it's very useful for us to try to just blame it on the students if they are not achieving, or just say that, oh, this is a good teacher or this is a bad teacher, not give any tools how to improve your teaching. But the level three thinking is that good learning happens as a result of something that the students do. And as you remember, this thought led us to think about different learning designs so that we as teachers could organize our courses in such a way that they sort of direct the students to do the right thing, and as a result of what they do, to study and to practice and work, they will learn. And this serves as an introduction to the idea of authentic learning tasks. So if we think that good learning takes place as a result of something that the student does, then we need to focus on the learning tasks. What do we ask the students to do? And are the tasks that we ask them to do helping them learn the right thing? So this is what this presentation is mainly about. If we think about learning activities, we hear this word often. We often hear about designing learning activities for students, but do we really stop to think, what do we mean by learning activities? According to this old uh, definition by Brophy and Alleman, activity is anything that the students are expected to do beyond getting input through reading or listening. So this means if the students are attending a lecture or only listening or reading in a book or in an article, this reading and listening is not yet a learning activity. It is important, it's an essential part, but it should be followed by learning activities. So in order to learn, the students would have to practice, apply the content that they are learning from the lecture or from the book or from wherever, from the video, evaluate, or in any other way respond to curricular content. So learning activities is something where the student takes an active role and actually does something with the things that they are learning. And a well-designed learning activity can be even more than this. And this is what authentic tasks are. They are they can actually even serve uh, as the backbone of the course. So this is the starting point. We are designing something for the students to do because we believe that learning happens as a result of something that the student does. Of course, when we think about learning, uh, it can be sometimes when we think about our own learning experiences, some of them have been more meaningful than others. I'm sure you would agree that not everything we learned in school, not everything we learned in university was as meaningful to us as something else. And now that uh, I'm sure some of you are familiar with Professor David Jonassen's work. He has been, for decades already, he has been studying the concept of meaningful learning and what makes learning meaningful. And his um, his definition distinguishes between four elements that make learning meaningful. So he says that learning should be active, it should be intentional, it should be constructive, and it should be cooperative. And all of these come into realization when students are working on authentic tasks. So, what do these mean? On this slide, I have tried to explain them a little bit further. So, according to Jonassen, human learning is a naturally active process. It's a mental and social process. So learning is not uh, it's not passive. Learning takes place when we are active in studying and learning a new skill or something. I don't know if any of you have seen the old, well, it's already quite old. I think 20 years old. The movie The Matrix. I love The Matrix. It's one of my favorite movies. But in this movie, there is a scene where the it's a science fiction movie, and in this movie, the main character is learning new skills in such a way that they sort of put this helmet in his head, and there are these sensors that connect to his brain, and like new information and new skills are just downloaded into his head through this device, and then as a result he learns all these uh, amazing martial arts skills and whatnot. So human learning is not really like that. Human learning is not just downloading new information into our brain, but it's an active process. So learning happens when we actively do something. We construct knowledge and interpretations, and this is what we do when we are learning a new thing. We are interpreting it. What does this mean to me? What is this? We try to connect the new thing with something that we already know, and we try, if we're learning a new skill, we are practicing it. We're constructing. What does this mean? What is this, and how does it connect to what I already know from before? Learning at its best is also intentional. So the learner has a goal in mind. I remember I mentioned to you in my introduction the first time that we met, so that I am an enthusiastic scuba diver. So when I was trying to learn to dive, it was very intentional. I had this image in my head about myself gliding in the depths of the sea and looking at all the fish, and I really had an intention to achieve this goal, to learn this skill, to be able to dive. And this is something that is sometimes missing from our students. They are not always able to connect what we are teaching to them with the goals that they have in mind. And finally, humans naturally learn from each other. So uh, we are not solitary species. Like we operate in teams, in collaboration with each other. We learn from each other. We help each other to learn. This is also true in the workplace. We work with others, and we learn from others. A child learns in the family. He or she learns from the parents and from the siblings and from the friends and from the cousins and grandparents. We are a social species. We are social beings, and we naturally learn in collaboration. And unfortunately, sometimes in formal education, we sort of lose track of this and make it more about competition than collaboration. whereas it's a natural inclination for people to work together to achieve a meaningful goal. So this is what Jonassen thinks about meaningful learning. And the reason I begin with this is that the authentic learning framework, the learning design framework, is very much based on Jonassen's meaningful learning concept. So this is an introduction. This is a background. Like, why is this important? So for learning to become meaningful, therefore, requires a meaningful task. And this is where we come to authentic task. A meaningful, authentic problem leads to deeper understanding and better transfer of learning. So when the students are really solving authentic problems, they are using higher order thinking skills, and they are not just trying to remember details, but they actually have to understand concepts. They actually have to be able to solve problems, and therefore it leads to a deeper understanding. They also help students develop ability to solve more complex problems, not just those that are broken into steps for them, but also complex problems. And we know that this world is full of complex problems that need to be solved. So it's really important for higher education to provide the opportunity for young people to develop these problem-solving skills. And also, if there are no complex tasks at all for university students, they may develop an oversimplified understanding of their discipline and also, consequently, of the world. So these are some reasons why I believe that authentic tasks are important. So a complex and challenging activity also provides motivation for the students. It's often more motivating when there is when it's relevant for the student. And in university, we teach complex content. It's not easy. Our disciplines are hard, and students need to learn quite difficult things and complex ideas. So an authentic activity helps to provide meaning and relevance to this complex content that we are teaching to our students. So they understand, how does this connect to actual, like, the world outside the university? And it also promotes collaborative problem solving and enables the creation of meaningful products and artifacts. And by this, I get into this in a little bit more detail a bit later on, but this means that that very often the work that students do at the university is not, like, the products that they produce. Oftentimes they don't have much value on their own. And by this, I don't mean that they're not valuable. They are. As learning artifacts, they're important. But if we think of this, what are the most typical things that we ask our students to do? How do they prove their learning? So they write reports, and they write essays, and they write presentations, and they take exams. And most of these things are only meaningful in the context of that studying. So you can't take that thing that the students have produced and take it outside the university into the world outside to solve a problem, or it's not necessarily helpful for anyone outside that context of studying. This is what I mean by meaningful products. So maybe that's enough of motivation of why authentic tasks are important, and why we should try to design such activities for our students. I also would like to compare authentic tasks with the so-called traditional learning activities. By traditional learning activities, I mean the types of learning tasks that are commonplace in universities, like I just described. And here, please don't think that traditional learning activities are bad and authentic tasks are good. It's not quite as clear cut. There is a place for traditional learning activities, but if we want to design also some authentic tasks for our students, it's important for us to have this clear picture in our heads of how is this different from what we are used to asking our students to do. So traditionally, learning activities are formulated by others, normally the teacher. They are well defined. They usually have predefined correct answers, or if not correct, then at least preferable answers. So normally the teacher has in his or her head the idea of what the ideal answer or ideal outcome would be, and the student who gets closest to that gets the best marks. As I just said, very typically the end product is only relevant in the classroom context and not outside. And sometimes that maybe an unwanted side effect is that students get encultured into the practices of the classroom rather than into the field that they study or into the practices of the profession that they're going to take or anything like that. So it's important to pass the test, even if you don't remember any of it next month. I don't know if you have any such memories from your own study years. I do. I have passed many tests and but not remember anything of it month or 2 months later. But it was important to pass the test. I'm sure you understand what I'm after here. It's important to finish on time. It's important to meet the requirements, and it is. I'm not saying that it's not, but it's also important to learn problem solving. It's also important to actually think critically and construct knowledge, actually learn something. So authentic tasks tend to be open-ended real-world problems. And they are ill-defined. And by this, I don't mean that they need to be messy and hard to understand, but they are open-ended and the students will have to do some defining of their own when they solve these problems. And as I said, end products are valuable in their own right. And students will need to use multiple methods and sources, not just one textbook or just teachers' lecture notes, but they have to do some research and find other sources as well. And in an authentic task, the important thing is coming up with a good solution to a problem, a good outcome, and that's more important than how the student has arrived in this solution. So in the next part of this lecture, I'm going to introduce to you the authentic learning framework or model as outlined by professors Jen Harrington, Thomas Reeves, and Ron Oliver. And this is the picture of the book that they have written. They have done so much research on authentic learning. This is just in this book. They concentrate on authentic e-learning, meaning authentic learning in an online learning environment. And I had the privilege of working closely with Professor Harrington when I was in Australia. We were working at the same university, and I can say from experience that her ideas really worked in practice, and they are very well researched. I don't know if you are already familiar with this model. I hope that this is not going to be a repetition of something that you know very well already. But now I'm going to introduce this model to you and how they define authentic learning and what sorts of elements signify an authentic task. This diagram introduces 9 principles that, according to these researchers, make authentic learning. It doesn't mean that an authentic learning task would always have to have all of these 9 elements in place, but these elements help us, the teacher, the practitioner, to think about our task design. Like these help us formulate our tasks in a more authentic way. And next, I'm going to introduce each of these 9 elements in a bit more detail. So, beginning from like 12 o'clock in this diagram, we have authentic context, and moving down authentic tasks and activities, access to expert performances, multiple roles and perspectives, collaborative construction of knowledge, reflection, articulation, scaffolding and coaching, and authentic assessment. So this begins with an authentic context. And no, when we think about authenticity in learning, we often tend to think about hands-on practice, like authentic learning for nursing would be, in our minds, would be practical training in a hospital. And of course, it's true. Authentic learning for chemistry would be laboratory tests. And again, it's true. We think about field trips, we think about work placement, we think about very physical things, and we tend to think that this is what is authentic. But thinking about authentic learning in e-learning, in an online environment, might be a bit more difficult. And here, I would like to ask you to think about authenticity not as a physical environment, but as the authenticity of the cognitive process. What do I mean by this? I mean that learning can be authentic anywhere, also in online and distance learning, as long as the cognitive work that the students do is authentic in a way that they need to think and act in the same way as professionals, as experts would. So to get this process started, we need an authentic context. And purpose for authentic context is to set the scene for the task and provide motivation. Authentic context reflects the way the knowledge would really be used. And it resembles the complexity of the real life setting. This does not need to be a physical context. It can be like it can be how shall I put this? We need to contextualize the task. Like, what would be the real context where a person would have to solve a problem with this? I hope this makes sense. Like an example, when I was teaching with Professor Harrington at Murdoch University in Australia, we were teaching a first year course for teacher trainees, for students of teacher education. And one of the authentic tasks that we asked the students to do, these are first year students, and we wanted them to learn to design learning tasks for young students. So the authentic context that we provided was that we asked them to imagine that they are a classroom teacher, and we actually had a real classroom teacher in the classroom to share about what the work is like and what the practice is like, and that students had already visited a school, so they knew what the context would be like, and then it was easier for them to start working on the authentic task, because they knew that this task is actually something that a real expert would do. So this is what authentic context means. It doesn't mean that you have to take the students to an actual physical place, but to make it clear for them that this is a realistic context. This is something that an expert would actually do. Authentic task has genuine real-world relevance. And they are complex and realistic problems, rather than small chunks of step 1, step 2, step 3 activities. And a feature of authentic learning is also that normally students would need a longer period of time to complete it. It's not something that they will complete in a day or during the session or even until next week lecture. It's normally a longer thing, and it requires creative thinking and problem solving rather than knowing the right answer, and also allows the student to create a meaningful product that has value in its own right. Like these teacher students that we had, they were working in teams, and they had to study the curriculum, and they had to decide like which year level they are addressing, which subject they are addressing, how is this. They had to study the national curriculum and look at like where would it fit into the curriculum, and they were working on it for quite a long time, and in the end what they had was lesson plans that they could actually use, like a ready lesson plan, and they could actually go and work in a school and use that lesson plan. So it had value in its own right. Students would also have to have access to expert performances. This means that they need to have access to how experts are thinking. Like, how would someone who is already very qualified in this thing that I am studying, how would a professional work in this situation? How would a real teacher design a lesson plan? How would a real lawyer start working on this type of problem, and so on? They should have access to stories about professional practice. And in many courses that I have taught where I've had authentic learning tasks, one rather easy way to do this is to provide, for example, videos where experts are sharing about their practice, or we could even use some sources that, like non-academic sources, we could link to them something that is already on the internet, like for example, I've had students follow like professional expert magazines and blogs. Oh, especially blogs are very good for this. I've had my business administration students follow expert blogs about given topics, and then I've encouraged them to comment on the blogs and initiate a conversation with the experts. And this is something that students really loved. Like, wow, I could actually write to this games developer or to this business person, and be in interaction with them and learn from them through their blogs or through their resources that they have in the internet. It's also important to provide multiple roles and perspectives so that the students will learn that as good as our lectures are or our textbooks, they are not the only authority in the world about this topic. So it's good to encourage students to explore different perspectives, also different points of view, and learn to evaluate which sources are reliable, which sources are not, and how others might approach this problem in a different way. So it's good to have a rich variety of learning resources rather than just our own lecture notes. And this, of course, the internet has made this so much easier for us than it was before, because it's full of good material. Unfortunately, it's also full of bad material, but this is something that the students will need to learn to distinguish the reliable from the not reliable, and the useful from the unhelpful. This is sometimes a difficult thing to achieve. We know that collaboration is an important skill. If I would ask any one of you, you would probably say that yes, you need to collaborate with the colleagues in one way or another, and it's something almost everyone will have to do at some point, to learn to collaborate and work in teams. But in studies, this is more difficult to achieve, because, as I said earlier, we often tend to compete rather than collaborate, and also students might find it hard to collaborate. And then all of these things that happen, like, oh, this person didn't pull their weight, and this person didn't contribute as much as this person. And then as a teacher, you are like, how shall I give them marks? Because obviously this one person has done most of it and the others are just free riding. You know this. But it's a little bit easier in an authentic learning task, because you can build them in such a way that they genuinely require a group effort, so that it's impossible to do alone. Also, we need to provide some incentive for collaborative learning. One method that I have used is a learning, to teach accountability for the students. I have also, like when they have worked in teams, I have asked them also to assign marks to each other and to themselves. Now, these are not the official marks that will stay in their study books, but uh, but if there is a person in the team that has got really low marks from everybody else, then I, as a teacher, can ask, like, what is this? What happened? Or what's going on here? Why is this person rated so low? And then I can intervene. So we can also teach by direct the students towards collaboration through incentives. And also building the task in such a way that it requires real collaboration rather than simple cooperation. The difference between these is that simple cooperation can be like, okay, you need to write this report together. And then there's 4 students and one says, okay, I write the introduction, I write this part, you write this part, and you write the conclusion. And then everybody just writes their own part and put them together. And they didn't really work together at all. So it's good to think, like, how do we actually encourage and even force? I don't like to use the word force, but like direct the students toward real collaboration. Could it be a bit more imaginative than just a simple division of labor? Also, authentic learning gives the students opportunities to reflect on what they are doing, what they are learning. Stop and think and make decisions, like, what shall I do next, rather than a single pathway. It's important for the students to get to compare their ideas with other students and also with the expert performance, and reflect on their own learning process. One tool that I have used a lot for reflection is, and I'm sure many of you perhaps also have used the same, is types of learning diaries. I have often asked the students to write a blog about their learning. Or when they are working collaboratively, they naturally reflect when they discuss, when they make decisions together. But it's good to provide these opportunities already before the end, so that it doesn't happen that the students will not reflect until the end of the course after the exam. They're like, oops, obviously I wasn't learning the right thing, and then the reflection is not helpful anymore because the course is over. Connected to this is the opportunity to articulate their learning. We all know that that learning is very effective when you actually have to explain it to someone else. So it's very good to provide students with opportunities to explain to someone else what they have learned, what they are doing. And if they are doing collaborative work, they do this naturally. They tell each other, like, well, I have done this and this, and I've learned this and this, and then they can share. But you can also do this in individual work through presentations, or in a learning management system, you can put up a discussion, or maybe put together a panel discussion with the students, so that they can make arguments and articulate their growing knowledge. But here, a word of warning with the discussion boards: it actually has to be a part of the course requirement, because experience shows that if you just put up a discussion board and say, this is where you can discuss, no one discusses. So so this is, remember from last time, the constructive alignment, so that the students know what the requirements for this course are, and then they fulfill those requirements. They typically don't do any extra work, which is economical and wise, I would say. We as teachers we wouldn't do much extra work either, things that we don't really need to do. So putting your knowledge into words and expressing it to others is really a good way of deepening the learning. And this can be spoken, or it can be written, or it can be discussion, or it can be there's so many tools in the learning management system even that you can use to provide these opportunities. So what is the teacher's role in this type of learning? It's to provide support for the learning process, like the scaffolding in this picture. When you are building a house, there needs to be scaffolding. Otherwise, the house will not stand. So the scaffolding is something that the teacher provides to support as the students construct, as the students build. And it's required especially at early stages, at the beginning of a course, at the beginning of the studies. First-year students especially need a lot of guidance. And the learning management system is also a very important tool in scaffolding. A good learning design is actually an act of scaffolding in itself. So the students don't need to ask all the time. If it's clear and well designed and thought of, then the learning management system is actually already scaffolding the students towards the right direction. Finally, there needs to be authentic assessment. If the assessment is not compatible with what the task has been, then it's sort of ruining the whole thing. So if the students do an authentic task, but they are not marked on that task, but they are actually marked on an exam that has nothing or very little to do with the task, it sort of defies the purpose. It takes away the incentive to do the task well. So it's very important that the assessment is integrated in the authentic activity. And we could consider that not just the end product, but the process also is important. So there could be like milestones and steps along the way where students present their progress in different ways. And those could be assessment points as well. And it's important to use multiple indicators of learning as well. Multiple perspectives, multiple ideas, multiple indicators of learning. So that's the model. I now get into practice by introducing two programs, online programs that I myself have been involved in and that have been built purposefully according to these 9 elements of authentic learning. And I have also conducted research on both of these programs. And Now, in this last part of the lecture, I'm going to share the research findings and introduce these programs to you. So the first one that I want to talk about is a postgraduate certificate in teaching in higher education that was called 21st Century Educators. So this was a program that we implemented in 2011 to 2013 in the United Arab Emirates in colleges of higher education. And I was leading this program, and we had participants from different colleges across different emirates, and they were teachers of different disciplines. So these were university teachers who wanted to have a certificate in teaching in university pedagogy. This program was in blended mode. Mostly it was online, but they had some sessions with local tutors that we had trained for the task, but mostly it was online. We had some synchronous sessions, but not very many. Be mindful, this is 10 years ago, so the technologies were not quite as developed yet. We didn't have Google Meets, we didn't have Zoom, we didn't have Teams, we didn't have any of those yet. We were using Moodle and Adobe Connect for our synchronous sessions, and it was a bit clunky, Adobe Connect, so we didn't do much of that. Mostly it was asynchronous, and the content was in Moodle, but the learning tasks that the participants did, they didn't do only in Moodle, but they were using different technologies. They were writing blogs, as I already mentioned, and they were also they could also use any technologies that they found appropriate for completing their tasks. So this was a program that they took alongside work. So everyone was working as a teacher and taking these studies at the same time. And the topics that we covered were learning theories, using technology for teaching and learning, assessment strategies, and so on. So the way this worked was that we actually treated the teacher's own classroom as a part of the authentic learning environment. So this was the authentic context. So all the theoretical knowledge that was taught was then, through authentic tasks, put into practice in the teacher's own classrooms. So they applied what they were learning, and this was also for everyone's personalized needs, because they were teachers of different disciplines, so they couldn't do exactly the same thing. But for instance, with learning technologies, everyone had to they had to design a learning task for their own students using technologies, and incorporate into this the theoretical knowledge from learning theories that they had learned, and make a plan, and then actually do it in their classrooms, and through action research method collect some evaluation data of how it is going, and evaluate the impact of what they were applying. So this was truly a reflective practice. They also wrote in their blogs a sort of a learning diary where they reflected on what they did in the classroom and how it worked, and so on and so forth. And some of the participants got so excited about this that they actually submitted their action research results to scholarly conferences, and they presented on their findings, and they got really excited about it. So this was one of the examples. the other one that I was involved in was World Health Organization's professional development program, which was fully online. And it was for specialists in vaccine management. And now, of course, I don't know anything about vaccine management, but I didn't have to because I was there as a pedagogical advisor. And the participants to this program were from all over the world. Mostly they were in developing countries where they worked as specialists in the World Health Organization projects. And we had an authentic, fully online learning environment, which was enabled with different technologies. The idea was for them to simulate a cold chain of how the vaccines would be dispatched and how the chain would be managed. So we had virtual visits, which were videos from actual like warehouses and actual transportation of the vaccines and all of that. We had expert interviews with the WHO experts. We had theoretical content, and we had authentic activities where the participants had to solve actual real life cold chain challenges together with their colleagues. So they were working in teams, and these teams they consisted of people who lived in different parts of the world. So this was a real challenge, but it worked so well. And of course, in this time of the pandemic, these skills that these people have acquired are more than helpful. So this is what we did. And in both of these programs, the role of technology was much more than platform for content delivery. So it was not so much learning from technology, it was learning with technology. This is also a David Jonason terminology, learning from or learning with technology. And the difference is learning from technology is where you just get content through technology. And learning with technology is where the students actually do something with the technology. They use technology as tools for working on the authentic task. So technology was used to create and share the authentic context in the form of videos and articles and all sorts of links to relevant content and so on. Technology facilitated the collaboration of the teams. So all the students, when they worked together, they were using different technologies for that. They lived in different countries, so they had to, they couldn't just get together and meet. It was used for communications, and it really helped to build a learning community through discussions, through sharing of thoughts. And now, main observation that I have made now we move on to the research results, that authentic learning is it's very engaging, it's very rewarding for students, but it's also very different from what they are used to. So it requires good design, and it requires support from the teacher. So although they appreciate the authenticity, they need the scaffolding. Remember the picture with the building and the scaffolding around it. So we need to help the students. They might even experience a sort of learning culture shock because it's very different. It may feel unfamiliar for them at first. But normally, and with all of these examples, I could also have listed the Australian examples but it was classroom based, so I didn't want to talk about that one here. But even in that one, students, first they were a little bit puzzled, like this is different. But then when they got the hang of it, they really enjoyed working with the authentic task. But the scaffolding part is so important. And how we can help students is a good learning design, so that it's clear, so that the goals and schedules and all of that are easy to find. It's so helpful for the students. This is something that we already talked about last time. When we have authentic tasks that are like bigger and not so step by step, we can help students by building in scaffolding measures such as milestones or discussions or any activities that will sort of feed towards the authentic task. It's also important to encourage peer support and give students opportunities to share expertise with each other. And when I say give opportunities, I sort of mean force them to, because as I said, if we just say, okay, here is your opportunity to give each other feedback, they will not take the time to do that. Most of them will not. But if giving each other feedback is a part of the requirement, then it will happen. And of course, students need advice, they need feedback, and they need support. This slide, this is a table from a study that I did from the 21st Century Educators Program. And the point here is that there's two extremes that we want to avoid when we are designing authentic tasks. Now, I call them the frying pan and the fire, as per the saying, something goes from the frying pan to the fire, meaning that it was not very good and actually it got worse when we tried to escape the situation. So the problem is that the challenge is to find the balance between these two extremes. And these extremes can be happen in the site design, and they can happen in the teacher's role, and they can happen in the task design. And the site design can be what I call a rail shooter. This is a video game term, and it means the type of video game where the player cannot move freely with the character that they are playing, but the character goes on a predetermined path, and you just react to what's happening around you. You have to jump over something or collect something or shoot something. So that's a rail shooter. The student doesn't get to make any decisions. They just go through it like a roller coaster ride. They sit in the cart, and it's the same for everyone. Very structured, very linear, and the destination is, or the path is similar to everyone. So this is not authentic. This doesn't require the students to make any decisions, think creatively at all. They just tick a box and move forward. So this is the other extreme. The other extreme is the lost without a map scenario, where the teacher has tried so much to avoid a linear structure that it goes to the other end and gets very messy and very chaotic. And the student doesn't find any information, and they don't find instructions, so they get overwhelming cognitive load. This is not good either. So we don't want the rail shooter. We also don't want the lost without a map. What we do want is a balanced site design with an inclusive, accessible, user-friendly design where the goals and navigation are clear. But there's also possibility for the student to make their own decisions and also use other tools than those that are on the LMS, also use other sources, navigate also outside the LMS and choose the order in which they think this problem should be approached. So that's the balanced design. Also, the teacher can be two extremes. One of them I called force feeding. This is like when a parent is feeding the baby and is not really paying attention. It's just taking the spoon to the baby's mouth again and again and again, and the baby is just there with an open mouth. Maybe some of you who have children may have this experience. This is very teacher dominated, very, very detailed, very enforced instructions. Everybody has to do the same thing. And again, the students don't get to make any decisions. Now, the other extreme is the negligent teacher, where the teacher is completely invisible. Students are left on their own devices, and the teacher is not there to give them any help. So students start feeling nobody cares about their learning. Now, the balanced design would have the teacher to give timely and constructive feedback at given points during the course, which the students know ahead of time that this is when I will get feedback. There's active communications, which does not mean that the teacher has to answer emails all the time, but actively enough. Maybe the teacher can scaffold student thinking in a discussion forum with good questions, with comments, with challenging their thinking. Help students to deal with the complexity of the content rather than clean the complexity out and try to chunk it to very small bits and just give them spoon after spoon after spoon to the student. And finally, task design. This is the actual design of the authentic task. What I call the assembly line is like in the factory. You know, the assembly line in a factory where the products just come and go past you in an assembly line. Everyone goes one after the other, and then you just press a button and something happens, and so on. So this is when the task has very detailed instructions, very clearly defined steps that everybody has to take the same steps, and the problems are very clearly defined by the teacher, and the outcomes are also uniform. Everyone is expected to produce more or less a similar ideal performance. Now, the other end is a needle in a haystack. So this is this is a problem that is also almost impossible for the student to solve because it's so ill-defined. Nobody has any idea of what to do, and sometimes perhaps even including the teacher. So if the students don't know what they should do, they will not be able to do it. Whereas balanced task design would be an authentic task that is relevant to students and the student can feel ownership to. It combines theory and practice, and it provides chances for ongoing reflection on both meaning of the theoretical knowledge and also on the practical application. So these are some things that I have identified in the research on the 21st Century Educators Program. All of these findings are in journal articles that I have linked on these slides, on the last slide, so you can look at them if you want to read more details. And now, finally, some findings from the World Health Organization Professional Learning Program. These are student quotes from interviews. I conducted interviews with the participants, and these are some of the things that they said. So one says, my best learning activity was the case study. So the case study was the authentic task. And see how it had an authentic context, because the participant says that I had to assume I'm the one doing the investigation on the ground. And before I didn't have that experience, but now I think I know how I would do that investigation. It was so realistic. So this person is describing an authentic task. And another one says that this was definitely very problem-based learning. And he has taken MOOCs before that have been done very well, but he says that the MOOCs were more theoretical, and it was more about learning theoretical content. But in this authentic task, they were asked to imagine that you are a health unit manager and you have to deal with this problem. So there is no ready answer. Now go in teams, make decisions, and deal with this problem. So this one says it was very hands-on. The one on the yellow box shows that this actually encouraged the participants to really do their very best. It was so realistic that they wanted to do their very best. It didn't feel like just passing a course. It felt like, oh, I really want to do this well. And this one reflects on how it was amazing that they were in different countries and they were working online on the case study without ever meeting, and still they were able to work together from different continents. So this was also authentic. See how we are actually working from different continents through technology at the moment. And the red one says that using the technology, you could see other people's work and they could see your work, and then you could comment. So this is the collaboration. And it was very motivating for them to be able to see how others would also solve the problem. And this one says how they appreciated the ability to learn from others also. So this is an example of access to expert performances. This picture illustrates a grounded theory of authentic learning process, which was a result of a study that I did together with Dr. Umit Kartoglu, who is a head scientist at the World Health Organization. He was the leader of this program. So here we see in this picture, which looks really complicated, that in the center of the learning process is the learner. This figure of a woman in the middle is the learner, and the mentors, this one talks about mentors because it was the teacher and it was also other mentors that were participating. The mentors are on the left-hand side, and the colleagues are the peers. The other students are on the right-hand side. So the learning took place in interactions. So the mentors provided guidance and feedback to the learner, who together with the peers constructed new knowledge. And they were engaged in authentic tasks. That's the question mark up there on the right-hand side. Had access to online resources, and the online resources helped in solving the authentic tasks. So, and technology facilitated all of these interactions. So that's what this picture is about. So it's very active, constructive, intentional, as the meaningful learning, a picture by David Jonassen that we looked at the very beginning. Active engagement in different interactions with content, with task, with peers, with teachers. And here I have just listed some things that we found to promote these interactions that the picture describes. These are things that I actually already mentioned earlier in my presentation. So there's probably no need to go into this in more detail anymore. Marilyn Lombardi has listed a framework for authentic task design. It's like a checklist. When we are designing authentic tasks, we can check, does this task have real world relevance? Is this a complex problem? Does this require sustained investigation from the part of the student? Will the student be required to use multiple sources and perspectives to solve this problem? Is there collaboration involved at some point of this course? It doesn't have to be all the time, but is there some collaboration element involved? Is there opportunities for reflection? Is this interdisciplinary or integrated? Do they produce finished products? Can there be multiple different interpretations and outcomes, or is there just one single right answer? So the more ticks you get in this, the more authentic it gets. that's the point here. So sometimes our task can have real world relevance, but it can still be not so very authentic if it's very well defined and it's just a very small activity or something like that. So here the checklist is in more words. Same thing with more words. Can it be completed simply by applying an existing solution? If yes, it's not so authentic. Does it require the students to make their own decisions, define the task, identify steps, seek out resources, choose methods, spend a lot of time, sometimes in collaboration with others? If yes, yeah, it will be authentic. And the last one, technology should be used as a cognitive tool rather than just content delivery channel. And here are the references. So all those links are actually the one that looks like it doesn't have a link is a link. It just for some reason it didn't turn blue. So there is Marilyn Lombardi's work is available through ResearchGate. You can get it from there. And all of my work is available through ResearchGate as well, or sometimes directly from the journal, because I've also published in Creative Commons licensed journals. So here, if you are interested in reading more, you have some resources. And I believe you will have access to these slides some way. Thank you. That was my presentation for today.
Dr.
If you
Hanna,
have any questions,
and a
comments.
very interesting
Yes.
discussion indeed. I think we are now ready for the question and answer, and I'd ask the tech team to also present us if there are questions in the YouTube live. But to get the ball rolling, I think Sir Neil Alpha, I'm gonna be taking your place to get started today. Uh, Ma'am Hannah, I'm very interested on the similarity of the authentic learning framework with project-based learning, or the PBL, the one that is promulgated it, I think in 1990 something ish. So like, is this in your experience, if you had an experience with PBL, I'm not an expert on PBL as well, but I'm very interested on it. How are they similar, and what is how is it distinguished, or are they actually not
Yeah.
distinguished from one another? So something like that. Can you comment on that, please?
Thank you for the question. And you are absolutely right. There are many similarities to problem-based learning, uh, because also in problem-based learning, the idea is that the students are solving problems rather than just acquiring content and remembering the content. It's these two approaches are definitely cousins with each other. They are not exactly the same, because problem-based learning is more it's more methodologically rigid. It has more like defined steps, like it always, to be real problem-based learning, it has to go in certain way, like there are steps, like in our university, the nursing degree program is using a lot of problem-based learning. Authentic learning is more like, it's more about giving principles of authenticity, and then we get to choose which ones are appropriate for my course, and it's just more like giving guidance rather than a very clear model, like it has to be like this, and then it moves on to this, and then it moves on to this. So it's not a process in a same way like the problem-based learning framework is a process, but this is more like general principles that we get to apply in a way that best suits our teaching.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hannah. That's very enlightening. We also welcome questions and comments from the audience. We have one question from our YouTube live from Sir J. Rowell. The question goes like this: how will the teacher or students determine that students are reading blogs written by the experts themselves?
This is a good question also. So if you ask your students to follow expert blogs, how do you know that they are actually doing that? Well, there are probably many ways, but what I have personally done is I have asked the students to write about what they learned from the blog. So reflect on what they learned from the expert blog. So for instance, in one of my courses, I asked the students, these were business administration students, and I was teaching them English, so business English. So I asked them to follow, choose a professional and follow their blog for the entire duration of the course, and then write a reflection on what they learned from the blog. Then where they also had to identify which blog it was, where the give the URL, so I could easily go and see and verify, yes, this blog exists. Yes, looks like they have read it because they are talking about the same thing as the blog is saying. So this is what I did. But this is, if you have 300 students, you of course cannot use something like this, because you can't go and look at 300 blogs. Oh, did they read this? Then you would have to think about something different. Maybe just ask the students, or if you are doing an exam, maybe ask them to one question to be like, what did you learn from the blog that you followed? And then if their answer is good, if they learned good things, it doesn't really matter if they really read the blog or all the blog posts or didn't. If they learned something useful, that's the meaningful thing. But they are encouraged to do that, because I tell them beforehand that there will be a question in the exam about the blog. That's a little bit sneaky, but
Yeah. Sir J. Ruel, is that answer of Dr. Hanna helpful for your query? Yes. Sir J. Ruel said, thank you, Dr. Hanna. And indeed, thank you, Dr. Hanna, for sharing your own experience on that regard. Yeah, very practical response indeed. I would agree with you, Sir J. Ruel. Thank you so much for raising that question. How about our participants from the Google Meet? We have one question from the Office of the Dean. Dr. Hanna, if the okay, it was a comment.
Janelle,
Yeah,
Edna is raising her hand.
sino po?
Edna Navwa.
Ay, Ma'am Eds, you can unmute yourself if you have any question so that Dr. Hanna can accommodate that. Can you unmute yourself and you're recognized po? All right. So I think that the tracing of the hand may be just an error. Anyway, Dr. Hanna, we have a comment from Ma'am Maria Rebecca Flores. She said, thank you for a very good presentation on authentic learning. However, these definitions or description could be subjective. I don't know if you agree. As a teacher, what are the indicators that you are in the right track of providing authentic learning?
it is true. It may be subjective. It's probably impossible to come up with a definition that would be completely objective. it, I know that, and I probably should have mentioned in the presentation that these principles have not been. They didn't come from the top of the head of the people who formulated this framework. It is actually a result of very comprehensive literature review and and uh, and uh, long history of studying different teaching and learning approaches. I know that this is more like a combination of things that have come up from the principles of situated learning, from cognitive apprenticeship, from Jonassen's meaningful learning, from many researchers who have studied deep learning and surface learning and problem-based learning and other approaches like that. So Harrington, Reeves, and Oliver didn't just come up with these things, but they emerged as a result of the analysis that they have done on previous research and previous pedagogical approaches. However, the what they wanted to do was to take these ideas together and create a practical framework that would collect these different signifiers of authenticity together, so that a practitioner would be more easily able to use it without having to read through lots and lots and lots of research literature. so that's what they have done. And then the model has been validated through further research into evaluative research of how it works. So I absolutely agree that there is subjectivity to it. And if you compare in the presentation, I had these 9 principles that come from Harrington, Reeves, and Oliver, and towards the end, I had the checklist from Marilyn Lombardi. So there's similarities, but also slight differences. So we don't need to take this as it fell from heaven or anything like that. It's just practical ideas for us to help us design helpful tasks for students.
Hannah. Hi. Good afternoon.
Hello, Ami.
This is in relation to the question of Ms. Rebecca a while ago. We found that the researchers that you have presented a while ago is very helpful, as well as the checklist and the rubric on the authentic task, as well as the teacher, the task design, and all those things are very helpful for all of us. But I guess what Rebecca wants to ask, for example, I'm a teacher. I'm looking at the checklist, and it's my first time to design an authentic task. So therefore, I may say, oh, okay, I guess it has multiple perspective. Okay, I'm good at this. It has real task. I'm good at this. So if it's your first time, you are thinking that it's really okay based on that principle, then I could say that it is okay. So my work is really an authentic learning activity, and I'm ready to implement this one to my students. As a sharing, I found out that because when I tried to look at that, the one that you presented, the frying pan, fire, and the balance design, when I tried to look at that in terms of task design with my practice, I guess for the task design, I want it to be very clear to my students. So I give all the procedures. So I realized that I need to be more imaginative in such a way that my students should be more creative. So I guess that with the conduct of professional training to teachers, I want to know more, because I also try to practice it to myself, and I've realized now that I should be more imaginative in such a way that I could not evaluate myself in the frying pan. I could still work more to a balanced design, but that reflection is based on my implementation. So my question is, how do we help teachers not to be very subjective on self-evaluating the design of the authentic task?
That's a very good question. Thank you for raising the question. And also, I would like to point out that I myself found just a brief comment on that rubric on the frying pan and the fire and the balance design. This rubric came from the finding that I was in the fire, like I was very deeply in the fire. My students did not know what to do. I tried to be so authentic that they were completely lost. So this is like preaching to myself more than to anyone else. like it's so easy to fall into one of the pits. Also, another thing that I would like to say here is that not all learning has to be authentic. So sometimes, and for some subjects, it's very necessary to have direct instruction and to have students practice with very step-by-step things. For example, if we take things like a natural science, like mathematics or uh, or physics, it's important, it's necessary, it's absolutely crucial for the students to become familiar with the formulas and with the calculations, and they have to practice in very a drill-like way before they can solve big problems, because before that they don't have the tools, they don't know how they could do that if they don't have the basic calculus skills. So this is not to say that all learning has to go authentic. It's only to say that that it's very helpful at some in appropriate times and in appropriate courses to actually give students the opportunity to work on authentic tasks. And how we can help teachers to achieve that is one of a good way is peer support, like work in teams and look at the designs together and not leave teachers alone to think about their learning design. If there is a group of teachers who want to start working on authentic tasks, it's good to get these people together, and they can help also each other in coming up with a more authentic design. Also, now I realized that I left something out from this presentation, which I should have included, and I will send you the link. There is an authentic learning website, which is administered by Professor Jan Harrington. There are resources. There is, for example, like a matrix where with all the 9 elements and questions that help students, like is your course like this, or is it like this, is this happening, or is this happening? And it's helping, it's a helpful tool in evaluating, like, where am I at in my design. Also, if you have the 9 elements and okay, you score very high on one, and then lower on one, and then midway in something else, and again low on something, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It's they don't have to be like all the 9 elements in a very high measure. It's more like a thinking tool to the teacher, like, to help you think about, like last time we talked about the recipe. So this is like a recipe. It gives you new ingredients that you can also test with, like, how did this go, and what observations do I make of this? Like I said, I myself made the observation that when I tried to go authentic, I actually got into the fire. so also be merciful to yourself. It's a learning process, and you can start with small steps, like not try to make a big authentic learning project as your first thing, but take some ideas, incorporate some ideas from the authentic learning principles into your teaching, and see how it goes, and then maybe start adding to it. Did I answer your question at all?
Thank you, Hannah. Yes, definitely yes. Actually, as you share, I also reflect on what happened to me last semester when I give an activity it's really the task is not well defined, and then when I try to observe what happened in the discussion forum, I know that my students were lost. So therefore, with that, I need to help them. So Some of them are not always present in the discussion forum, but I know they can access our Facebook chat. So I need to send a message. Oh, by the way, I guess we need to meet synchronously. I need to explain to you something. So I'm sorry for that. So I guess that's the way on the support that we could give along the way in doing the task. Yeah.
That's a fantastic example of the scaffolding and coaching. So when the teacher sees, okay, my students didn't understand this, then you can already help them before it's too late. Like, that's a fantastic example of a good good coaching and scaffolding.
Thank
So
you,
much,
Dr.
Dr. Hannah. And we really learned a lot. We are running out of time here, but there are still two more questions in our chat box by Ma'am Shalini and Dr. Luel. We'll just cater them. Dr. Hannah, can we still cater a few more questions?
Yes, and
And
I try to be more brief in my answers.
yes, thank you so much. So the first question goes like this: if authentic tasks call for collaboration or group work, can we say that it is disadvantageous for students who are introverts or prefer to work alone? If we provide authentic tasks, how can we then help students who find it difficult to work with others?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you very much for raising this question. There has been a lot of talk about this because at some point collaborative learning became a very big thing, and then really it could be that that introvert students are being disadvantaged. So my advice would be to have both types of learning, because also for if it's also the best way to cater for different personality types is to have a good variety. So something will suit someone. And if everything is individual, uh, then the students are not really learning collaboration skills, and also they are not getting the benefit of of the social interaction. But if everything is collaborative, then it's really disadvantageous for the student who uh, is introvert. Also, a good way to think about this is how would a group of professionals in this field be working? Like, is this thing that we are teaching, is it something that when the students graduate and they get a job, will they need to work collaboratively, or would this task be performed individually also in real life? So if it's something that would inherently be done individually, then it's better to have an individual task. But if it's something that really will require collaboration skills, then we are actually doing a disservice to the introvert student if we are not giving them a safe opportunity to practice those skills, if those skills will be essential for them in the working life.
So much, Dr. Hannah. Mamshe, I hope that answered your question. All right, let's proceed with the second question by Dr. Luel Lucero. He mentioned the model by Harrington, Reeves, and Oliver interests me. One of the principles there is reflection. You also shared examples on how you allow your students to reflect, and I understand that reflection is a supplementary assessment in conjunction with a performance task. The question is, I am interested in how you utilize the data you get from the reflections of your students.
That's a good question. Now, do you mean how do I utilize the data for the assessment, or I suppose that it's for assessment because the question was about.
Yes, Dr. Hannah, it is for assessment, according to Dr.
Yeah. Okay. So sometimes reflection will happen just as a side product, and it doesn't always has to be assessed. But for example, if sometimes I have had tasks where the students will have to reflect on what they have learned in the form of a learning diary, or uh, a blog post or a discussion forum post or something like that. So in those cases, I have, it depends on what the learning goals have been. But sometimes it's just that it has to be completed. But because I have wanted to encourage like open reflection so that they don't take stress over the reflection. So because I don't want the students to perform reflection. I want them to reflect genuinely, like, so that they don't need to think, oh, is my reflection good enough or not? So it's not, then I cannot be concerned about the content. Like if they reflect on the content, it's more important for me than if they reflect on the learning, the learning process. Like so I think more often I have just it has just been a pass fail type of thing, the reflection has to be there, but I don't really look at the quality of the content in it. But sometimes it has been assessed numerically, and then the marks are given on the depth of the reflection rather than if they acquired the theoretical content or anything like that. But this is a good question. There is not one right answer. It depends on what you are teaching. It depends on what else the students are doing. We also don't want to over assess them, and we often would want to encourage them to reflect freely, not to be afraid of whether their reflection is good or not good. So I know this is not a very good answer.
Dr. Luell? Yes, Dr. Luell, thanks you, Dr. Hanna. And
Thank you.
I hope that we still have more time, but I guess it's already lunchtime in Finland and it's already dinner time in the Philippines, so we have to stop here. But I guess we learned a lot, no, from the discussion and the lecture itself. Thank you so much, Dr. Hanna, for sharing your expertise to us this afternoon. And thank you also for our participants who are joining us in the YouTube Live, and thank you for interacting in the YouTube Live comment section. For all webinar participants, to get your certificate of attendance, please do check the evaluation link that will be given in the comment section and in the chat box. Now, before we go, first I would like to ask all of us to just give Dr. Hanna a round of applause to express our appreciation for such a wonderful session this afternoon. Thank you so much, Dr. Hanna.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
for announcements, before we go from this afternoon session, first, we have for our Inflex trainee and participants, we have another session on February 5 with Professor Teras of UPOU, same time, 4 to 6 p.m. Philippine time. So I hope that we see each other on the Friday. And for the next public lecture of Dr. Hanna, it will be on February 10, 2020. And Dr. Hanna will be talking about research-based teaching by conducting effectiveness evaluations through action research. So I guess for the duration now until the next public lecture of Dr. Hanna, please, I encourage you to avail the opportunity to consult Dr. Hanna. You can reach her via email as she shared to us on her first visit. So please contact her and consult her with our own designing of authentic learning tasks. So once again, thank you so much, Dr. Hanna, for joining us this afternoon. And
Thank
I
you.
guess
Thank you all.
And that ends our session for this afternoon. I would like to especially mention a word of thanks for DTTE for hosting this visiting professorship. This is Janil once again. Thank you and God bless. May we have a good weekend ahead of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting.